Very warm welcome to everyone who is on the call so far. And we'll be starting in just a minute. We just wanted to do a quick sound check and check that people could see our British Sign Language interpreter and that everyone could hear me okay. Okay, so we're making a start, everyone. So a very warm welcome to everyone who's joining us on the Zoom call here this evening. It's great to not see because I can't see your faces, but it's good to see the numbers going up of people who are attending this evening. I'd like to say a warm welcome to Nikki as well, our sign language interpreter. And hopefully Nikki's visible to you all and able to help us and be with us this evening. Thanks so much, Nikki. So just to talk you through how this evening is going to be working, we are on the next phase of our pay campaign, and we're going to be giving you lots of information about the pay campaign, about why this is so important, and about steps that we want you to take over the next few days and weeks in order to restore our education system to where it should be, to go some way to beginning that process. So we're going to be giving you information this evening. We're going to be talking to you about steps we want you to take. In the chat, you will hopefully see the code of behaviour has been posted. It's really important to me and to us as a union that our union spaces are safe spaces, and whether that's us meeting online or in the real world, the behaviour and expectations within our NEU spaces are really important, and it's important that everyone feels safe and welcome here. So please have a look at the behaviour statement, at the code of behaviour that applies to the chat and to all of the contributions here this evening. Shortly, we will be hearing from Daniel, our General Secretary. He'll be talking us through the next phase of the campaign. And there will be time later on for answers, so to any questions you might have. So if you can put any questions in the Q&A function, please. Don't put questions in the chat. If you can put questions in the Q&A, and we will come to those later. Any questions that we aren't able or don't get round to answering this evening, they will go on the FAQs section of the website. So if your question isn't answered this evening, it will be at some point. And we anticipate that most of the answers from this evening will go on to the Q&A on the website. So if you've got questions for Daniel for later, please put them into the Q&A on the Zoom, and we'll come back to those later. So I am going to be handing over to Daniel, who's going to talk to us about the next phase of the campaign, important information and background as to why this is so important and so necessary that we're taking this action now. And he's going to be talking us through next steps and where we're going next as a union. So thank you so much, Daniel, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Emma, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much for your time. I want to talk to you about our forthcoming indicative ballots for teachers in England and Wales, sixth form colleges and support staff members. Last year, we faced a drastic cut in our standard of living, the worst in generations. A double-digit inflation following 13 years of below inflation pay awards was met with a paltry pay award from the government. Now, we took 8 days of strike action in schools and 9 in sixth form colleges. We stood up in defence of our profession and standard of living. And in doing so, we forced the government to move to a more than double its original pay award. But our action wasn't just about pay, it was about ensuring that already overstretched school budgets were not decimated by leaders being asked to fund our pay rise. Our action was always about the funding of our pay award. Our action won an additional £3 billion in new money for schools. When your national executive recommended acceptance of last year's hard-won pay award, they did so on the basis that this was the first step in an ongoing campaign to win back the 25% pay reduction in real terms suffered since 2010. We knew what we knew last summer, we know even more today. We know it's hard out there in our schools and colleges. Workloads are high, the resources available to you to do your jobs effectively are diminished. And I know your personal finances are still a huge concern. Most of you are worried about how to pay the bills. 1 in 6 of you are forced to take second jobs. It is a disgraceful situation and really makes my blood boil. Now, you are amazing professionals. The work you do with our young people is hugely appreciated by the public. But you are operating in the context of a government that just doesn't value education. It doesn't value you as professionals or indeed the future of our children. It's time that Rishi Sunak, Jeremy Hunt, and Gillian Keegan valued you and valued our children. We have to stand up together again to make them listen, to make them act. Now, schools are crumbling around the heads of our children due to 14 years of neglect. The shocking state of our school buildings is due to a deliberate £43.8 billion underspend on our school estate since 2010. This government are spending a third of what their own figures tell them is needed annually to keep schools safe and positive learning environments. 70% of schools have less funding in real terms today than they did 14 years ago. Our sixth forms have been hit hard, on average having 15% less funding than they did 14 years ago. And to make these figures even worse, it is often those schools serving the most deprived communities that are being hit the hardest. And we know this must change. Children only get one chance at school. Coming out of the pandemic, we have seen pupil need increase exponentially, yet the most in need in our schools are being neglected by our government due to a £4.6 billion funding shortfall in the high needs funding block. The underfunding of education is hitting our children and it is hitting the most in need of support the hardest. So we have to change this. We've appealed to Gillian Keegan, to the Department for Education, to the Chancellor of the Exchequer on multiple occasions to do the right thing, to invest in education and the future of our children. We wrote to them with sister unions appealing for them to invest the necessary funding at the autumn statement, and they gave nothing. We wrote to them with sister unions appealing for them to invest the necessary funding to repair the school estate. They gave nothing. We have met with Gillian Keegan multiple times as joint unions, ASCL, NAHT, NASUWT, NEU, and we have made these appeals in person. But the Secretary of State is deaf to these appeals, although she does think she's doing a effing good job. Yet every teacher, every leader, every TA I speak to tells me that Gillian Keegan is not doing a good job. The fact is that this government is refusing to put the necessary funding to keep education functioning, or to ensure that you are paid fairly as a professional. Now, it is grossly unfair that a teacher in England with 6 years experience earns a staggering £7,183 less than an equivalent teacher in Scotland. But we know that this isn't just about fairness, but it is the only way to solve the recruitment and retention crisis that remains deep and severe. Education is facing a genuine existential threat because of the government's inability to recruit and train teachers. And we know that this is being driven by two things. Number one, the fact that you are working a huge amount of unpaid hours every week, topping the OECD league table in which working weeks of 55 to 60 hours have become normalized. There's been a fall of 24% in trainee recruitment in 2023-24 compared to before the pandemic. And we know that number two, this has been driven by the fact that your pay has been cut by a quarter compared to 2010, meaning that teacher pay growth since 2010 has moved significantly below similar graduates and pay in the wider economy. What is the scale of the crisis? Well, there has been a drastic fall in trainee teacher recruitment. Only 3 secondary school subjects hit their recruitment targets. The government missed its target for recruitment of new secondary school teachers in 23-24 by 50% and by 4% in primary schools, making this the 10th year of missed targets in the last 11. It's a good job for Gillian Keegan that she isn't subject to performance related pay. And the picture gets no better for retention. 1 in 4 teachers leave the profession within 3 years of qualification, a third within 5 years, and we continue to hemorrhage the experience from our classrooms. And this is having such a detrimental effect on the quality of education provision our children have access to. Class sizes in both primary and secondary and in special schools and alternative provision settings have gone up significantly since 2010. Over 1 million pupils were taught in class sizes of over 30. The ratio of pupils to teachers in schools in England is the highest in Europe and higher than the USA. There are 7 more pupils per teacher in England than in other European countries. Our children really do deserve better. You and the rest of our profession deserve better. Now, we've met with the Secretary of State and she's just not listening to the realities on the ground. The DfE have been more concerned with the implementation of minimum service levels to try and curtail your democratic rights than to implement minimum service levels for education for our children, a fully funded school that is well built and resourced to allow for a rich, diverse curriculum that enables every child to flourish. In such an environment, we can only reverse the decline that our children have had to endure over the past 14 years through the empowerment of our members to act together and to force the issue. The government are constraining the school teachers review body by constraining the funding envelope. Now, this government are lining up a pay award of 1 to 2% this year. They want to claw back the money that they put into education last year that they just didn't want to. And instead of engaging with the STRB process in good faith, this government have delayed their pay recommendation, treating you with absolute contempt. So this year, a general election year, we need to make the issue of school funding, education provision, and your pay an unignorable issue. So we have relaunched the School Cuts campaign. It's not just as a website, but a genuine coalition of organisations and parents, ASCL, NAHT, the NGA, Parentkind, and the NEU in the demand for more money for education. But to save education, we must be willing to take action to ensure that educators get a fully funded, inflation plus pay increase and further funding to improve staffing levels in schools, colleges and education services. So on Saturday, the 2nd of March, our preliminary ballot for teachers in England on the issue of funding and pay will launch. On the same day, our preliminary ballot for teachers in Wales will launch on the issues of funding, pay, and reform of the school year. For our support staff members, our preliminary ballot will open on Saturday, the 16th of March, asking you if you support the NJC pay demand of an above inflation pay award, and would you vote yes to strike action alongside NJC unions in support of their demand. Now, our friends at NASUWT are also conducting a preliminary ballot on the same issues at the same time. We are not alone. This year, we can unite every staff room and we can push back together. This year, we can campaign with parents in our communities and raise the demand for fair funding for education. We know that our parents support us. But also this year, let's ensure that this government awards a fully funded pay award that takes steps towards a pay correction that shifts the grave recruitment and retention crisis that is having such a detrimental effect to the education of our children. Now, in order to place as much pressure as possible on this current government, as well as any incoming one, we need a resounding yes vote in the preliminary ballot. Now, you proved last year that we can win if we stand together, and voting on Saturday when our preliminary ballot opens is the first step to doing that. So if you are a member in a school or college with no rep, talk to your colleagues about the ballot and ask them to vote on Saturday, and keep asking them until they have voted. Get together, organize a union meeting, and get a rep or team of reps elected. If you are interested in becoming a rep, there is a link to our website from being put in the chat, and fill it in and somebody will get in touch. Now, if you're a member in a school or a college with a rep, help them out. Ask your colleagues to vote on Saturday, attend any workplace union meetings, and continue to remind your colleagues to vote. If you are a rep, hold a members meeting if you haven't already. There are loads of resources to help you on our Foley on site. Then have follow-up conversations with members, reminding them to vote and why it's important to vote. Log on to your workplace dashboard to keep track of the turnout in your school and let us know who you have spoken to. For branch secretaries and officers, we need you to run for refresher pay briefings for your reps, follow up with reps that can't attend, supporting them to organise workplace meetings and to have one-to-one conversations to encourage as many members as possible to vote. Using the dashboard targets school list, prioritise meetings in target schools with no rep. We ask you to do these things because we know how to win ballots. They are not won through our comms and social media strategy. They are won when you vote, when you hold union meetings to discuss issues in your workplace, and when you talk to your colleagues and they vote. So let's ensure we get the strongest possible turnout in this preliminary ballot. Let's ensure that education is prioritised by this government and any incoming government. Organise meetings in your school, talk to your colleagues, vote yes to action in the preliminary ballot, and be ready to build a formal ballot should this government continue to neglect you, our schools, and our children. Thank you very much, Emma.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And I think Daniel has set out there really clearly exactly why this action is so important. I've seen some of the comments in the chat around pay and funding. And yes, it's important that we go some way to restoring our pay to protect our profession and our professionalism. But also we know for our members that funding is so important because we are working in a system in crisis. And so we're asking for investment in education, just like Daniel said, for us and for the future for our children. It can feel quite bleak sometimes when we look at the stories, when we see the figures, when we see what's going on out there in the world, and we're working in a system that we know how difficult it is. But the reason we're here, the reason we are active in the union, the reason that we're taking this action is that because we have to have hope, and we have to have that belief that through the union we can make a change that will make a change to us and to the education system. And so I'm really pleased that we've got Carly with us, because I'm hoping that Carly is going to bring us a message of hope and of positivity from where she is. Carly is a primary school teacher and joint secretary from Hackney, and Carly's just going to be talking to us about some of the actions that she's been taking in her workplace and in Hackney. So thank you so much for being with us, Carly, and handing over to you.
Thank you, Emma. I thought before I begin, I just want to highlight that this is in no way a blueprint for all branches, as our branches face different challenges, but I'm hoping some of the ways in which we are preparing and building the ballot will be useful. A lot of you will, of course, already be doing many things that I'm going to talk about, so I can only emphasize how critical it is that we engage in them persistently if we want to win this ballot. Ideally, we're trying to support our reps and activists in talking about the ballot to members because the personal touch always works best. Our reps really are the jewel in the crown in our union, and it will be because of them that we win. We're encouraging them to go around and have conversations because emails and texts, whilst helpful, only go so far. Our reps and activists need to feel empowered and armed with all the right information to prepare and convince members to vote yes in this ballot. To prepare our reps, we started with some polls and surveys to try and get a clear view of their views towards starting the ballot process again. It was overwhelmingly positive, especially where funding was concerned. This was all before the executive made any decisions. Once the decision was made and the dates are set, we organised a district meeting with reps and key activists that we identified from the Pay Up 2023 campaign. In this meeting, funding was the biggest priority and led much of the discussion. This helped us to shape our future correspondence with reps and members. It also helped us plan our next general meeting, in which we invited Andrew Baisley, one of the founders of the School Cuts website, to tell us more about school cuts specific to our branch and to London. This meeting was well attended, and reps left with a much clearer overview of how and why our schools are affected by this funding crisis. It also helped us create our slides for the reps to use in their workplace meetings. We have brilliant reps in Hackney. Some are very experienced, while others are quite new, and then some are completely brand new. So it's not an easy thing to do, going around and badgering our members to get the votes in. So we decided to try and link up experienced reps with less experienced reps with the intention that they could share tips, suggestions for organising, and just general catch-up chit-chat about things that they might be stressing about. We have also allocated reps to our officers and committee members to call up and give support where needed, whilst getting feedback on the feeling and mood in schools, and to offer any support in coming in if that is suggested by the rep. We've also encouraged reps to seek support from other activists in their school, so to build a little supportive team around them to share the load, especially in larger secondary schools where it can be very hard to get around to all members. This is something that any member can do, as Daniel just spoke about. If you're on this call and you're not a rep or an officer, call your branch and tell them you want to help turn out the ballot. You will get the support from your union to do exactly that. Ideally, if others in your school feel the same, get a group together. This worked really well last time. One of our schools had all members vote and then asked the branch what else they could do to help. They ended up organising a phone banking session held at their school. These are the members we need to support once again to win this ballot. As many of you know, the School Cuts website has relaunched, and this has been fundamental in our part in building the ballot. As mentioned before, funding was a key motivator for many of our members wanting to engage in the process. So we have developed resources and infographics that can easily be shared with members that are Hackney and funding specific. Infographics with quotes and statistics that are in fact shocking and thought-provoking, difficult to ignore, but easy to share. These funding statistics have prompted some of our reps to organise coffee meetings with parents about how the funding crisis affects their children, what the repercussions are if educators do not take the government to task, and asking parents to pledge support should we win this ballot. Something that we are trying to now create into a roadmap to share around other branches. We've also found that the Schools Cuts campaign has given us an opportunity to engage with head teachers. So with their help, we're trying to work on school-based funding meetings in which we can also bring up the ballot as they go hand in hand. For our schools without reps, we've asked our regional officers to target the ones with the largest member count and try to organise meetings. Target the schools where you will get the most votes. Finally, there are more general things that we try to do regularly that are part and parcel of the branch. Emails with key information and links to materials and meetings, like the one that we had on the 19th to get the vote out meeting, which was fantastic. We need more of that sort of building. Reps bulletins, local text, sending out dashboard tutorials for our reps, as some of them will have never used it before, WhatsApp engagements and newsletters. There are so many other things happening in our branches. I'm just one person speaking on this call, but so many on this call are doing the business. It's really important that we share good practice, that we make time to have meetings to share this good practice. I truly believe we can win this. My reps have shown me that they are willing to stand firm for education, and that gives me hope that if we keep preparing and building, we will come out swinging. But we can't become complacent. The work needs to be done. The graft needs to be put in. So whatever you can do to get involved, reach out to your branch now, and I'm sure we'll have this in the bag.
That's great. Thank you so much, Carly, for sharing that. And there's so many ideas and actions in there that hopefully people have listened to and been inspired by and can take on board as well. We know that on this call, this is an all-member Zoom call, so there may well be secretaries on here who have listened to some of the things that Carly has done within her branch and can use some of those ideas. We know that there will be reps on the call who have listened to the things that Carly has said reps in Hackney are doing, but we know that there are members without reps potentially on the call as well. So if you are in a school and you don't have a rep at the moment and you think it's something you might be interested in taking on in order to help build the ballot, to make sure we get that turnout that we need, the information has been put on the chat and I'm sure will be put in again of how to become the rep, how to get materials that will help you organise in your workplace. And we know that where we have reps is where we're strongest and where we get the best ballot turnout. So if you've got any questions, pop them in the Q&A. We will be going to questions now, and I'll be going through some of those common questions that we've had answered. So as I said, if maybe you're a member that doesn't have a rep in a school at the moment and you want to ask, how can you organise, what can you do, put your question into the Q&A, and we've got some time now for going over those. So Daniel, the first question that we've had come in that I'm going to ask you to address, please, is how effective are we going to be on our own without the other unions backing?
So I don't think we are on our own, Emma. Currently, NASUWT are engaging in a preliminary ballot on the same issues that we are. So they are balloting their members also. And also, we've had the heads unions alongside us all the way through in terms of raising the demands for adequate funding and a pay award that takes steps to avert the recruitment and retention crisis moving forward. I think there is widespread support from what we are doing from other unions, and also widespread support from the public and particularly parents. You know, as a parent, we we all know the dire state that schools are currently in. The situation cannot continue. We're at schools in a poly crisis, whether it's school buildings, whether it's funding, whether it's SEND, early years, and of course, in regards to school staff pay as well.
Great, thank you, Daniel. Next question, Damien has asked, what about support staff? When are they being asked to be balloted, or when will they be balloted?
So we are going to open up our indicative ballot for support staff on the 16th of March. And this is in regards to us supporting NJC unions above inflation pay award demand. And we are balloting members on their willingness to strike alongside NJC unions, should that be needed, should there be a pay award that is a further pay cut it's not adequate for our support staff members. You know, we are really determined as a trade union to work alongside other unions in the demand for a fair pay settlement for all school staff, support staff members included.
Thanks, Daniel. And yeah, we've had another question around that, and I think you've probably just answered it. Somebody said, I work in an SLD SEND school. We're at make or break point with funding. I have numerous support staff wanting to leave. What are we doing to help support staff?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we often talk, there is also a crisis in recruitment and retention when it comes to support staff colleagues. It is not uncommon now for support staff colleagues to be seeking jobs elsewhere. I was in my old school, an SEMH school, just last week, and my head teacher was really advising me how they are struggling to recruit and retain support staff who are doing an absolutely vital job working with some of the most vulnerable children in our society. You know, this is a huge problem, and our children, as I said earlier, absolutely do deserve better.
Thanks, Daniel. I've got a couple of questions now around unfunded pay rises and making sure that they're not accepted. So the question from Shard is, can we be certain that any unfunded pay rise will not be accepted?
Well, we are a democratic organisation, and the settlement of the last year's pay award was overwhelmingly accepted at that point by members. I think it's really important that we prioritize at the moment having the largest, most vibrant campaign that really puts the pressure on government around the issues of funding, education provision, and pay. And, you know, should we have to take action, we're absolutely ready for it. But I think it's really important that we cross each bridge at a time, one step at a time, and let's raise that demand with government in the here and now. And I'll just make you all aware, literally while we are on this call, I've had an email from Her Majesty's government with their evidence that they are submitting to the STRB. So we'll have staff looking through that with a fine-tooth comb to see what the government are saying on the issue of pay and funding and what their recommendation is. But if it's anything like the letter that went to that was published just before Christmas. I imagine it will make some quite grim reading, but we'll keep you very much informed.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, of course. And we're working in a situation that's changing all the time. And that's why it's important that we have such a strong turnout in this preliminary ballot to really show the government that we're serious about the action that we're prepared to take, to really force them into giving us the pay award that we deserve. So next question, Daniel, is around minimum service levels from Terence. And the question is, with the minimum service levels in education likely to come in September, how will this affect strike action?
Well, we don't know entirely yet. The government, of course, engaged in a consultation on the issue of minimum service levels in education. We have an indication of where they do want to land. What they were consulting on is 74% of students being in school on any given strike day. So they were consulting on every child in primary, every child in an exam year, every child with an EHCP, every child on preschool meals, every child who is the child of a key worker. We don't know where they've got to in terms of the conclusion of that consultation, as they have not published any regulations yet. But look, we will be pressuring employers to not serve work notices. But to be honest, it is quite an unworkable piece of legislation when you think that we have 25,000 schools. That is a lot of work that the government want to put onto employers. And what we have seen actually is in rail, they have become really quite unworkable. But really, the only real response that we can have to minimum service levels and the government's attempt to try and curtail your democratic rights, which we mustn't underestimate. This is the biggest attack on your democratic freedoms in our lifetime. The only real response we can have is to make that legislation unworkable and deepen the industrial action.
Thanks. Sorry, excuse me. Thank you so much, Daniel. Next question is around early years, and just Stephen asking, what steps will the campaign take to ensure that the message is out there that we demand funding and pay restoration for all professionals in education, making sure that the importance of the brain architects in early years are being respected, QTS is maintained, and the vital work they do is recognised?
Yes, absolutely. We are going to absolutely ensure that that remains central to our campaign. Of course, early years education is vitally important. Sorry, there's just someone knocking on my door. It's vitally important, and yeah, we will absolutely ensure that that remains central as part of the School Cuts campaign, and also a part of the broader industrial campaign as well. I just want to really just advise you all that the government has submitted its evidence and is advising that pay awards must return to a more sustainable, is the word, level next year. That's what the Department for Education has recommended. So what we can expect is not a pay award that takes a step towards a correction that seeks to avert the recruitment and retention crisis, but we are facing a further cut in living standards.
Thanks, Daniel. And I've got a couple of questions around accepting last year's pay award, and so I think it's important to address that. And Jay has asked about why we were encouraged to accept the last pay offer made to us if the plan was to revisit the subject again now.
So why was the recommendation to accept was a decision through the national executive made based on an assessment on what could be achieved at that point against an ideologically cemented government. I mean, we mustn't underestimate what was achieved last year. The government starting point was 3%. We moved them to 6.5% through 8 days of action, and it was up against an ideologically cemented government with a huge majority. So let's not underestimate what was achieved. you shifted the government on the issue of pay, quite possibly for the first time in decades. Now, we know that it was, far short of that 25% correction that we absolutely need to see, but it was a staging post. It was a view of the executive that we paused here, and that we would reconvene on the campaign the following academic year, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Thank you, Daniel. I've got a couple of questions from the chat around funding, and people, you addressed it in your opening statement, and I think people are really reiterating that in the chats, that there is a huge feeling out there that members would really like this campaign to be focused on school funding. We accept that pay is a fair issue and we need to campaign on that, but funding is a really fundamental part of this campaign. How can we ensure that funding is at the forefront of the campaign?
Well, absolutely. We have relaunched the school cuts campaign. We need £12.2 billion to restore school spending power to 2010 levels, to repair the school estate, to fix the SEND crisis. And we are working with partners, and we will be lobbying MPs on that issue at the same time as we are mounting the industrial campaign on the issue of pay, funding, and education provision. The two things are not detached from each other. We need to be building big coalitions on this issue to raise the demand. We all recognise the absolute dire state of education at the moment, and the funding of pay awards will of course be central. I mean, I think as a teacher, I always felt it was an entirely problematic situation where every year we would get a below inflation pay award that was never properly funded, meaning that there would be detrimental effects on provision elsewhere. We absolutely cannot just allow this continued decline to continue, and that's why we have the campaign, as well as mounting an industrial campaign as well.
Thanks, Daniel. I've just got a couple of last questions for you, and I know there are more questions in the Q&A than we'll be able to answer on this call, but please be reassured that all of your questions will be saved. They'll be put into the FAQs on the website. So if we haven't got round to your question this evening, then apologies, but they will be taken on board and answered at some point. So penultimate question is, how do we become a rep, or at least find more information to share with staff? And I've seen a couple of people commenting in Q&As that how do they find out about becoming the rep? Could you just talk a little bit about that, please, Daniel?
So to become a rep, you can, there is plenty of information on our folio and resources on our website to become a rep, but organise a meeting of union members and get yourself elected and become a rep. Listen, being the rep is the most important job in the union. The union is not this abstract thing in Hamilton House in London. It is in schools and it's in colleges where it matters most. And being a rep is an absolutely vital job. So do become a rep, get elected by your colleagues, and yeah, campaign for be the real, at the sharp end, the forefront of the campaign for high quality education that our children deserve access to.
Thanks, Daniel. And I'll just say as well, the comment in the chat was that somebody said they felt overwhelmed at becoming a rep. And it can feel scary, but there's lots of support out there. Most districts will have reps WhatsApp groups that you can join, that you can support each other. And you'll have help from your district secretary, your branch secretary, from your region. So you're never alone, and you'll find that there is plenty of support out there. So if you're thinking of becoming a rep, go to the website. There's a form you can fill in to say that you're interested. Somebody will be in touch with you and help you organise that meeting. It's it is the most important role in the union, as Daniel said. And the last question for you, Daniel, that I think is a really good place to finish. And this is specifically about Wales, but I think it could apply to all of our members. How can I build traction in school, considering members felt as if we took a raw deal in Wales? And I think the question is really, how can we build traction in school, or how can we bring people around to the idea that this is really important and building that momentum?
In Wales, I mean, well, yeah, certainly we're not just balloting on the issues of pay, funding, and education provision in Wales, but also around the reform of the school year, the desire to reduce summer holidays down by 2 weeks to a 4 week summer. I From everything I gather from speaking to members in Wales, that this is a real motivating factor. So please do talk to them about that. But as well as the real problematic issue with resource provision, particularly in small rural schools that are really being hit by the funding situation at the moment. I think it's really important that we remember that it's when we stand together that our power multiplies. So do encourage all colleagues to take part in this campaign to push back against just the continued erosion of comprehensive education. Our schools, as you know, can just not continue on this direction of travel. And we absolutely have to do everything in our power to, this year in particular, a general election year, to try and turn the tide.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and thank you for answering all of those questions as well. I know I threw lots of different things at you, but I think you've given everyone on the call really helpful information. And again, just to say, if your question wasn't answered this evening, it will be looked at. We are going to save all of those questions, and they will be going on to the question and answer section of the folio on the website at some point. So I just want to wrap up. We're nearly at the end of the call. Just to say thank you so much to you all for coming. Last year, we achieved something really amazing. We achieved something we've never done before. And by standing together, we put money into education and we put money into our pockets during a cost of living crisis. And that can't be underestimated. But we were really clear when we accepted that offer that it wasn't the end of the campaign. It was just the beginning of us using our collective strength. And we need to use that again and make that stand again. Because the reality is at the moment, we're not able to educate in the way that we want to. A story in the newspaper that came out just this week of 150 children in a hall doing a science lesson. That's not an uncommon story that I'm hearing throughout the country. We know there are children with SEND who can't get the support they need. There's not a head teacher that I've spoken to in the country that isn't seriously worried about recruitment and retention and how to staff their classes. I've heard of schools that have year groups at a time being sent home because there just aren't the teachers to teach the children. So I think the question we have to ask ourselves and the question that we have to ask the members when we're talking to them about whether they vote in this ballot again is, are you able to be the kind of educator you want to be in the current system? And I think most of us, if we're realistic about that, would say we're not able to. So yes, we fight for ourselves, we fight for our pay, we fight for our members not to have to use food banks and to have the kind of life that they should be entitled to. The poster that's above me says the worker must have bread, but she must have roses too. So we fight for that. We fight for our profession and for the continuation of our profession, for the future of our profession. And we fight for the future of the education system. So just want to reiterate some of those key things that we're asking you to do. The ballot goes live at noon on Saturday. So make sure that you vote as soon as that comes out. Speak to your colleagues in your workplaces tomorrow about the ballot. Speak to your rep, ask if they want any help. If there isn't a rep, go on the website, look at how you can call a meeting and get yourself elected. If you're a rep, we know how hard it is. We know how busy you are. But this is really important. And we know that you're going to be working so hard. And thank you for everything that you're doing. And if you're secretary on the call as well, thank you for organising the reps. Again, we know that where we have the reps, we're strongest. And that's where we get our ballot turnout. So we're the people who are going to win this. As Daniel said, we are the union in workplaces up and down the country. That's where our strength is. And that's where we're going to make a difference. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Daniel. Thank you to Carly. And thank you to Nikki for the interpreting as well. Have a great rest of the week, everyone, and look forward to seeing you all really soon.
Thank you so much, Emma.